Good morning. Today is Thursday, June 8th, 2023. What I'd like to share with you this morning is inspired by, loosely based on, an essay by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. This week's Torah portion is very personal for me because it's about the difficulty of leadership. Now, the truth is, no position of leadership is easy. Leading Jews is harder still. And spiritual leadership can be the most difficult of all. Leaders have a public face that is usually calm, upbeat, optimistic. That is usually the message that we want to give. But I'm sure everyone understands that behind that facade, every leader experiences storms of emotions, of anxieties that have to be kept sometimes bottled in. And it's for all sorts of reasons. There are deep divisions between people, deep goals that we set that are very hard to reach. And in particular, there are lots of problems that we face that are just intractable. Just last night during dinner, and I'm going to share this with no identifying details, I interrupted dinner to take an emergency phone call. I don't take phone calls during dinner except if it's an emergency. And in this one phone call, I was dealing with problems of illness, abuse, possible suicide, the need for treatment of several different types. And every single one of these elements in this complicated, tragic situation was intractable, long-term, and needed the involvement of several different professionals with different levels of expertise. You know, when I'm presented with a problem, a challenge, a difficulty, often I think about it and divide them into two categories. There are problems that have answers, and there are problems that do not have answers. Problems that have answers doesn't mean that I'll find the answer, and it doesn't mean that I'll find the right answer, but there is an answer. I find much more difficult than that are the problems where there just are not answers. There is no solution to this problem other than to comfort and support and ameliorate, but there is no solution. Those are the really difficult problems. And it happens a lot. It happens a lot to me. It happens a lot to any rabbi. It happens a lot to all kinds of people. But whenever I feel like that, I think about this week's Torah portion. Because in our Torah portion this week, Baloscha, we see that Moshe has reached a very low and dark place in his leadership. Vayehi ha'am k'misonanim. The people began to complain. Mi yachilenu basar, who will feed us meat? They complained to Moshe as they're traveling through the desert. Zacharnu es hadogasha nochal b'mitzrayim chinam. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt free of charge. And just listen how frustrating that is, because they are idealizing Egypt, where they were slaves and persecuted and beaten, but they had fish, and it was free. Well, of course, it was free because they were slaves and they had no money. But all of a sudden, this revisionist view makes it seem like Egypt was a vacation. And now all we have is this manna. And so they complain. They forget in just a few short weeks everything that Moshe has done for them, everything that God has done for them. And they complain about the food. I have to tell you, without any question, the most common complaint that I face over the course of my 40 years in this job relates to Kiddush food. And I think to myself, this may be the closest I ever get to being in the same league as Moshe. He and I got the same complaints. And there are many rabbis that would say the same. Okay, well, Hashem gets very angry with this complaint and its implication of lack of gratitude, lack of faith. But Moshe's response is more than just getting angry. Moshe appears to suffer a complete emotional breakdown. Vayomer Moshe el Hashem, Moshe says to Hashem, Lama hareosa la'avdecha. Why have you caused such harm to me? Lama lo matzasi chen beinecha. Why have I not found favor in your eyes? Lasum es masa kol ha'am hazeh alai. Why have you placed this burden on me? Why do you put me in a position where I've got to hear such complaints? I can't take it anymore. Lo uchal anochi levadi lo seises kol ha'am hazeh. I can't take it anymore. I am not able to bear the burden of these people. Ki kaved mimeni. It is too heavy. I can't handle it. It is the lowest point at which we have seen Moshe so far in the Torah. Now, as much as I feel for Moshe, ironically, for me, as someone who's, tiny, 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 in comparison, nothing in comparison, but I also have to listen to complaints about the Kiddush food. For me, this passage is actually quite helpful. Because this is Moshe. He's the greatest. He's the greatest leader. He's the role model of leadership. And I say to myself, I go through difficulty and I have problems and people come to me with issues and there are things that are frustrating and painful and I don't sleep at night. But at least I haven't gotten this far. I haven't fallen this low. This hasn't happened to me. Baruch Hashem, thank God, so far. And I think to myself, first of all, if I haven't reached this point, I must be doing okay. Somehow I'm managing. And much more importantly, Moshe went through this terrible depth, this dark place in his soul, and he still went on to be our greatest leader. Because feeling failure does not necessarily mean that you have failed. And this is a tremendously important lesson. It's an empowering lesson that every leader, every person needs to know. Winston Churchill famously said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." What's striking about the Torah, this Torah portion in particular, but a number of others, is the way that the Torah openly shows us these dark moments of the soul of our greatest leaders. Moshe was not the only prophet to pray to God, I can't take it anymore. Eliyahu Hanavi, Yirmiyahu the prophet, Jeremiah the prophet, Jonah. All throughout the book of Tehillim, Psalms, King David gives rise and expression to despair. Keli, Keli, lama zavtani, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so, while, yes, of course, it is emotionally difficult to see these great people grappling, struggling with this darkness and this feeling of despair, but at the same time, ironically, these descriptions are profoundly liberating because it teaches us that Judaism is not a guarantee that you will be spared heartache. And anyone who promises it is leading you astray. Judaism is not a life that will prevent you from feeling pain. And if that is your intention, or that's what you're trying to teach people, you and they will be sorely disappointed. Because the essence of Judaism is that it is a faith, an approach to life that seeks to change the world. Rabbi Sacks writes, Judaism is a protest against the world that is in the name of the world that ought to be. That's what any Jewish spiritual leader stands for. Protesting against the world as it is. Now, we all have our different style of how we do it and what words we use and what approach we take. But basically, Judaism at its fundamental is a protest. And we seek change. And here's the point. People don't like change. People don't want change. People are comfortable where they are. People can find comfort in routine, even if it is the food they were eating as slaves. And that's why Moshe and David and Eliyahu and Yirmiyahu and many others and many today find it so hard to exercise this leadership. And there will be these dark periods. But knowing that, and knowing people much greater than me have gone through this, this is what gives me the strength to continue. Because what I say to myself is, and what so many of you and others say to ourselves is, like many of you, I deliberately choose a path in life that has difficulties. I choose to take the hard cases. And if I'm going to do that, if you're going to do that, then I need to be realistic about my expectations and evaluate myself on my effort, not just on the outcome. Because Winston Churchill is absolutely correct. Failure is not fatal. That is the lesson of our Torah portion. It's the courage to continue that counts. My friends, I wish you a good day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.